Hello, space friends. Captain Snuggles here. I am once again in X4 Foundations to take a closer look at the improved capital ship AI, specifically Destroyer AI, in patch 7.0. Now, I've been having a lot of fun during the past couple of X4 videos, but now it is time to put on my serious gamer pants and do some serious gaming. This is not the time for fun, it is time for facts, figures, and cold, cruel arithmetic. I have collected hours and hours of footage of destroyer combat. I've analyzed it, I've crunched the numbers, I even made a spreadsheet. We will look at destroyers versus stations and destroyers versus other capital ships. For both of those categories, we're going to review a few clips in painstaking detail, and then I will give you a breakdown of my overall findings, along with a few tips and tricks that I have learned along the way. First, I'll point out that we are in the very final days of the beta, so I do not expect many changes between now and full release, but some things could still change. If there are any major changes, I will let you know. Now, before we get into destroyer specifics, I want to give you a general recommendation, which is, in serious combat situations, do not give the AI anything that you can't afford to lose. That's because of the nature of AI. There's a lot of RNG, a huge amount of randomness, lots of dice being rolled, so to speak. And remember, in combat, it's not just your AI rolling dice, it's also the enemy AI. And whoever rolls better gets an advantage. Sometimes an overwhelming advantage. Now, a good preparation can tilt the odds heavily in your favor, and we'll talk about how to do that. But the chance of catastrophic failure will always be greater than zero. It might be very small, but it will be greater than zero. So, if you're not willing to take that chance with a particular ship, do not send that ship into serious combat under AI control. Now, with that general tidbit out of the way, let's talk about destroyers. First things first, I want to dive right into the deep end here and talk about what I believe is the main thing that makes capital ship AI unique. And that is firing arcs. So this mess you see on your screen right here represents the firing arcs of the Phoenix E class Teladi destroyer in the configuration in which I usually run it. Now, oversimplifying here, but essentially the darker yellow an area is on this diagram, the more damage the Phoenix can project in that area. And don't forget, space is three-dimensional, and so are firing arcs. And so, once again, you can see the same thing shown on the right. And so if you put those two images together in your mind, you can start to form an idea of where this ship can project the most firepower and where it is weaker. And there's a lot of complexity here, but you can see it at least somewhat broken down in the general information tab of the ship. You can see what I'm going to call quadrants, even though there are 6 of them: fore, aft, starboard, port, aloft, and below. All have different potential damage outputs. You can see there's a lot of variability on the Phoenix here. They are not all as wildly variable as this, but there's always going to be some variation there. And speaking of variation, don't forget that different weapon systems vary greatly in their potential damage application. So we're not just talking about the damage itself, but also the projectile speed, projectile range, the rotation speed of the turret, which makes different weapon systems, and therefore different firing arcs, better or worse suited to hit certain types of targets. So all of that, in a nutshell, is why capital ship AI is so complex. The AI chooses a target and then has to think, alright, what weapons do I have that can actually hit that target? And then it has to think, okay, what quadrant do I want to point at the target to bring the most of those weapons to bear? Then it has to actually maneuver and do that under battlefield conditions where it's getting shot, the enemy is maneuvering, and all that. Then it has to consistently reevaluate the target and weapon systems and reposition accordingly. And I do think that this behavior has changed in version 7.0 because the behavior I've observed in my testing does not quite match my understanding of the scripts from 6.0 and before. So, I know this has been a lot to take in, but I hope it made at least some degree of sense, and, let's just keep it in mind moving forward as we look at these clips, and hopefully it will help to explain some of the wild and wacky maneuvers that you will see ships pulling off. Speaking of wild and wacky, here's a very wild little clip of dots wiggling around on a map. This is low attention combat, also known as out of sector combat, which is simply combat that the player is not directly observing. I'm going to keep this section short and sweet. Destroyers are extremely good in low attention combat. Always have been, always will be. The exact mechanics have changed some over the years, but at its core, low attention mode is just a numbers game, and destroyers have big numbers. 4 or 5 well-fit destroyers grouped close together in low attention mode can probably tackle about 80% of the game's challenges. That said, low attention combat is very simplistic, not a lot of AI going on, not a lot of strategy involved. It's extremely slow, and it doesn't look very nice. It's just dots wiggling on a map. So, we're not going to spend any more time on it. Instead, we're going to focus on the fun stuff. High attention in-sector combat. The first behavior we're going to look at will be destroyers versus stations. The reason we're starting with that is that although station attacks are very dangerous, they are relatively simple just because stations don't move. So, this will be an opportunity for us to observe the way destroyers maneuver and fight within a simple, static battlefield before we then move on to the more complicated clips of ship-to-ship action. So what's happening here is I have 8 destroyers, 4 Phoenix, 2 Behemoth, 2 Ray. They have all been ordered independently to attack this station, so they are not in fleet. They all start at the same spot, and they each have their own independent attack order. So you can see they've rolled up in more or less the same location for the most part, but you can already see some differences in the way they're attacking. For starters, one of the Rays has deliberately chosen a position above the plane of the station, so flew up and is shooting down. You can also see one of the Phoenixes, the one farthest on the right of the big clump there, is attacking with both its main battery and its plasma. And you can also see the one Phoenix just derping around way off in the distance. This one rolled a very odd angle and a very long distance on its maneuvering RNG and is now just way out there. So, essentially, we have 8 destroyers. 2 of them have done pretty well in their initial positioning. The Ray that has that nice angle shooting down, and the Phoenix that is attacking with both main and secondary batteries. Those are both doing really well. The Phoenix that's way off in the distance, derping around, not doing so well. And the other 5 are all engaging with the main batteries and are doing fine. So, 8 ships, 2 really good, 1 bad, 5 fine. Now from this point on, they are just going to keep doing what they're doing. The station isn't moving, and so they don't need to move either. They have chosen their attack angles and methods, and they are just going to keep on keeping on, except for that guy off in the distance, who hopefully will eventually figure his stuff out and re-engage. But these 7 here are just gonna keep on hammering away the same way they have been. And that will continue happening until the module that they're all shooting explodes. And there it goes. Now that their first target is destroyed, they all have to pick a second target. They mostly pick the same one, but you can see that Ray up top is hesitating, taking its time, is actually going to end up picking a different target than the rest of them. So already a little bit of a difference in targeting, and you can also see that there is a difference in the way that these destroyers are pursuing their second target. So a couple of them positioned fairly aggressively. The ones on the right use their main engines for a quick burst of speed, moved into new positions and started firing again almost immediately. Others are moving more methodically. You can see that one Phoenix has dived down below the plane of the station and shooting up a little bit. One Behemoth has moved up above the plane of the station and is shooting down like the Ray. And meanwhile, one Phoenix, the farthest left, is slowly nudging itself forward and sort of taking an iterative approach. Just moving forward piece by piece, taking a couple of shots, seeing how they do, moving forward again, etc., etc. And meanwhile, that Ray up top still has not picked a new target, still has not fired again, still figuring things out, so it is moving very slowly, very hesitantly. So, already you can see that the position of these ships is diverging, and their target selection is also diverging somewhat. So they are spreading out more and more in terms of their tactics and their position. And you can also see their weapon choices changing, as most of the destroyers have closed range and are now engaging with both primary and secondary batteries. So you can see that each time a module explodes on the station, each destroyer is going to independently reevaluate its targets, its attack strategy, until you eventually end up with this. So this is the very last station module. We've cut forward to the very end. You can see that these destroyers have totally organically, on their own volition, spread out in a 3D formation surrounding the station. We have two ships shooting up from below, one ship shooting down from above. The Behemoth on the right has moved around the plane of the station and is shooting sort of from the side. Then we have a few more back in the original starting point, still searching for targets. So, again, this has happened totally organically. I have not touched the controls of these ships, have not issued any new orders since that original attack order against the station. So, just as each station module exploded, those small differences in destroyer behavior, basically different rolls of the dice, have all added up into this box-like formation around the station. Now, seeing this, you might ask, well, if the destroyers spread out around the station anyway, wouldn't it be faster to just pre-spread them yourself, form a ring around the station, and attack that way? And the answer is, yes, absolutely, that is faster and better, and we will get to that in a minute. But one of the reasons why that is faster and better is because it minimizes the risk associated with destroyer movement around stations. And to show you what I mean by that, we're going to look at a couple of clips here. So first we're going to rewind and look at two destroyers that reposition within this attack run that we have been looking at. So here you can see a Phoenix E ducking below the station to get to a firing position lower down so it can shoot up into these remaining modules. Now you saw it took glancing blows from the station guns, but it moved quickly through the very edge of their firing range and only took about 20% damage on its shields. This one, same thing. Moves quickly through the edge of turret range, ends up taking about 30% damage on its shields. No big deal on either one. So both these ships are moving as fast as they possibly can through just the very edge of the danger zone to reach their new firing positions, to shoot up and hit their desired targets on the bottom of the station. Very minimal risk, very minimal damage. It really goes great. Now contrast those two destroyer movements with this one right here. Different system, but very similar station being attacked by an identical Phoenix E. And look how much closer this one is moving to these station modules. It's getting right up under their guns, and it's not moving very fast at all. It's only moving about half as quickly as those previous Phoenixes were, even though it's more than capable of moving the same speed. And it even slows down before all is said and done. So it is really... it's taking a much more dangerous angle through this station's guns, and it's lingering there way longer than it needs to. Still moving at half speed, taking hit after hit, shields are down, it's taking hull damage. Now it's even dropped to a quarter speed. The engines are fine. Check here in a moment. The engines are not damaged, but it slows down and just lingers there and dies. And the difference between that Phoenix and the two we saw earlier is that that Phoenix was in a fleet following the fleet commander's orders, whereas those previous Phoenixes were following their own orders under their own AI and totally free to control their own movements. Now you might hear that and say, Snuggles, that sounds very anecdotal. To which I would respond by pulling out my spreadsheet here. Now I know we're here for spaceships, not spreadsheets, so I'm not going to linger here too long. I just want to make it known that I did some extensive testing of destroyer behavior in station attacks. First against a Terran shipyard, using a variety of settings, a variety of ship groupings, and a variety of different attack orders. Then I took what I considered the most successful runs out of those tests and put them up against a Xenon defense station. And across the board, the results were consistent. When I used destroyers independently, by themselves, out of fleet, they never took a single loss. Even if I set them up at bad approach angles, unfavorable starting scenarios, they still always recovered and never took a single casualty. And the time to destroy the station, the time to kill, was always pretty reasonable across the board. Now, contrast that with the fleet scenarios. The fleets always, across the board, universally had more losses than the no fleet, destroyer only scenarios. And only occasionally did those higher losses translate into better time to kill. So essentially, the fleet commander AI prioritizes the mission of the fleet above the individual safety of the fleet members. That fleet commander is willing to take risks that the individual destroyer commanders would not. Now, that can be a good thing in the really fast-paced, dynamic scenarios of ship-to-ship engagements, but that clearly does not help against stations. Stations are not going anywhere. You do not have to be fast against them. And stations are so powerful that taking that risk to shave a couple of seconds off a destroyer's transit time is very likely to end up hurting you a lot more than it helps you. And the Fleet Commander AI really doesn't understand that. Or it's just programmed to be very, very sadistic. One or the other, take your pick. The point being that independent destroyers performed consistently better than destroyers in fleets, and those independent destroyers performed best when manually arranged in a ring around the target. And that just about sums up my observations and my recommendations for destroyers attacking stations. I will just add on the recommendation side, I'm not saying that there will never be a scenario in which you want a fleet to attack a station, but all else being equal, I do highly recommend using destroyers independently, and especially arranging them in that ring formation. I will also add that you really have to make sure that you cover your destroyers as they are engaged with the station, because if enemy attackers fly up and shoot them in the back, they can very literally push your destroyers into the station's guns, and you can go from a sure win to a catastrophic loss in just a few moments. So, even if you don't have support ships actively helping your destroyers engage the station, you probably want support ships covering your destroyers' backs. And now that actually finishes summing up my observations and my recommendations for station attacks. Now, we can move on to ship-to-ship engagements. Now, as I've already pointed out at least once, stations don't move, but ships do, which makes ship-to-ship engagements vastly more complicated, especially from an AI standpoint. Both offense and defense are way more dynamic, as ships try to keep their opponents in the best possible firing arc, while also staying out of their opponent's strongest firing arcs. They have to constantly reevaluate ranges, vectors, incoming damage, outgoing damage, and available targets, and they have to respond to all of that in real time. I will say up front here, fleets rule in ship-to-ship engagements. As imperfect as fleet AI is, fleet commanders can evaluate changes on the battlefield and respond in a coordinated way, as opposed to the disorganized responses of individual ships' captains. However, I've already discussed fleet behavior a bit in this video, and I already have extensive footage of fleet combat on the channel, so for this ship-to-ship combat section, we're going to stay focused purely on destroyer behavior individually. Specifically, we're looking at destroyers versus other capital ships, and even more specifically, at destroyers versus the Xenon K. The K is very powerful and very common. Every player will fight one at some point, and most players will fight a lot of them. They are labeled as destroyers, but they're a completely different class of vessel from the player's destroyers. They're much closer to a battleship in terms of size and power, and they even use the battleship icon on the map. They are hyper-aggressive juggernauts that just relentlessly move forward and steamroll anything in their path, which has always caused problems for destroyer AI. Historically, Ks have had no problem taking down 2, 3, or even 4 destroyers. So, in these clips, I'm going to send 4 destroyers at a K in a couple of different scenarios, and see what happens. Those 4 destroyers will be 2 Rays, 1 Phoenix E, and 1 Behemoth E. On paper, theoretically, should be more than enough to take down a K, but we'll see. Now, the first scenario is going to be very basic, throwing the 4 of them in a headlong assault against an isolated K. Now, we're looking at what I'll call Ray 1 here. Ray 1 exhibits classic pre-7.0 behavior. It has decided that it's going to engage this K with its main battery, and that it's going to do that from a predetermined range. And as the 2 of them charge head-to-head at each other in Travel Drive, Ray 1 here finds itself below its minimum desired range, and so it turns around and will try to pull range again to re-engage with its main battery. So that's classic pre-7.0 behavior, but now look at Ray 2 here. Ray 2, identical ship, identical approach vector, identical scenario, but is exhibiting the opposite behavior. Ray 2 does not want to engage with the main battery. Ray 2 wants to brawl. So, it is moving in, it's engaging with its most powerful firing arc, its forward turrets, and it's actually moving into point-blank range and using its lateral thrusters to strafe along the hull of the K and just rake its entire length with turret fire. This is a pretty new behavior. Now, meanwhile, we see that the Phoenix E stopped at a more appropriate range, was the last on the battlefield, and so has been able to open fire with its main battery. You see it land a couple shots and then it misses, and so now it's going to stop firing, readjust, and open fire again to see if it can hit this time. It goes wide again, and so you'll once again see it adjust its fire, and now finally sweeps it along the hull of the K. Unfortunately, the K has gotten in close enough to hit the Phoenix with graviton turrets, so the Phoenix is now going to duck out, full range, and then attempt to re-engage. Meanwhile, the Behemoth is also there, doing Behemoth things. Having a great time, I'm sure, just happy to be here. The two Rays, you can see they've actually switched roles, and so Ray 1 kept getting pursued by the K, decided it could not pull range to its main battery engagement range, and has turned around and is engaging with turrets. Meanwhile, Ray 2 on the right side there got behind the K, saw an opportunity to get out of range, regen some shields, and has pulled back and is going to get out to main turret range and try to re-engage from there. Here's Ray 1 again, coming in for a firing run with its turrets, once again not trying to use its main battery, trying to duke it out and brawl at close range, and doing a pretty good job of it. Meanwhile, looking around for Ray 2, there it is, lining up firing run. Phoenix on the left side of the screen seems happy enough just to fire away with plasma and not its main battery. Now that the K is damaged and moving slowly, we're seeing very similar behavior to what we saw against the station, which is that the destroyers are playing it safe, sort of kiting back out of range, boxing the K in, and just picking away when they have the opportunity from a safe range. And there comes Ray 2, lined up its shot and took its chance, landed a nice main battery hit against the K here, took it down to very, very low hull HP, and it is not long for this world. Destroyers continuing to just chip away and finish it off. Alright. Now, in that first clip there, we were able to see my destroyers really dismantle that K. They were able to maneuver how they wanted to, engage with the weapon systems they wanted to, and adapt those tactics on the fly as the battle progressed. Even Ray 1, that was under constant pressure from the K, was able to adapt, turn around, and brawl effectively by the end of the fight. But now, things are getting a little bit more complicated, because now the K has backup. There's going to be a constant stream of fighters and corvettes coming in, 1 by 1, 2 by 2, from that north gate there. So my destroyers are not going to be totally free to move wherever they want. They'll have to deal with constant harassment. You can already see that here as Ray 1 comes under attack. Looks like it was trying to line up a strafing run with its turrets anyway. Same for the Behemoth there. But the Phoenix and Ray 2 have pulled up farther back and looked like they were going for sniping positions with their main batteries. But you can see in the background there, they are getting attacked by a fighter and a corvette, which has essentially disrupted their sniping positions. They're having to maneuver to keep their light turrets on those lighter ships, and as a result, we're not able to line up their main batteries. Meanwhile, the brawlers are brawling, but possibly due to interference from the fighters, they're having trouble. Ray 1 has actually called me up on the intercom to complain about getting hit. I do not respond. I let it figure it out on its own, but it is getting hammered. This is likely to be because the K is not under sniper pressure. It has not taken any major damage yet. It's free to maneuver where it wants, and has gotten a really nice firing angle above my destroyers. Destroyers are all trying to adapt now. Ray 2 has moved into brawl, given up on the long-range sniping position. Behemoth is still trying to brawl. Ray 1 is trying to pull some range. The Phoenix is trying to relocate to a better sniper position. Ray 1 has taken heavy damage, but, well, continuing to take heavy damage. Hopefully Ray 2 up above is going to be able to distract you. Probably not intentional, but Ray 2 is sort of body blocking for Ray 1, taking the heat off of it, engaging at point blank range with its upper firing arc. And yeah, now the K has switched targets over to Ray 2. Now I'm taking a look. This brawling method is great for stripping off turrets, and the K is already missing 3 of its 4 forward turrets. They've been blasted off by the constant brawling from the Rays. But its shields and hull are still looking great. Now you can see the Behemoth is rotating around to try and get a firing arc with its main battery, and the Phoenix also is continuing to attempt to snipe. Now in the background, the Behemoth is opening up with the main guns. It's gotten a really nice position, shooting basically straight up at the K, which in the olden days destroyers would not do. Now it's doing something interesting. It had a good firing angle, but is actually moving forward. Possibly because of the fighter pressure, it has chosen not to stay put, staying mobile, and is going in to rake the K with its turrets. It almost looks like an MMO party sort of switching aggro on a raid boss. So the Behemoth has pinned down the K up there, brawling, keeping it from maneuvering as it wants to. And now this Phoenix has a great firing angle, and so does the Raid, both shooting almost straight up. Just a devastating salvo into the belly of the beast, so to speak, right up into the bottom of the K there. And it looked a little bit dicey at first, but the destroyers have once again adapted to the situation, maneuvered, repositioned, reconsidered their attack methods on the fly, and yeah, are now just taking this K apart. Just like before, they have it boxed in. You can see the Behemoth is still under heavy fighter attack, but it has not done anything monumentally stupid as a result of those fighter shots. And so now, this battle is done. Once again, solid adaptation from the destroyers, showing off some fairly flexible and fairly new AI behaviors. So let's sum up what we just saw. Destroyers are exhibiting some new behaviors, engaging with a greater variety of weapon systems at a greater variety of ranges than they used to, adapting their strategies on the fly, and generally dealing reasonable damage without being too suicidal. That said, we did also see that they still need time and space to set up attacks with their main batteries, and that their firing positions can be easily disrupted by enemy attacks. That is why, against other capital ships, I highly recommend giving your destroyers some fighter support. Ideally, you'll use them as part of a well-balanced fleet with a carrier, interceptors, and attack fighters, because even a light carrier with weak fighters will tremendously increase your destroyer's anti-capital performance by just buying them the time and space that they need. But whether you deploy a carrier or not, you should at least give each destroyer enough defense fighters to fill all of its docks. They won't prevent your destroyer from being attacked, but they will drive away attackers and help the destroyer to sort of reset, get a new firing position, and bring its main weapons to bear. Now, to dive a little deeper, for that defense fighter role, I do recommend heavy fighters with weapons that are accurate enough to hit fighters, but powerful enough to put a dent in capital ships. Thermal disintegrators, shard launchers, and boron drive disruption weapons are my personal go-tos. And that will wrap up the ship-to-ship combat section, which means we are very close to wrapping up this video. I've really tried to focus mainly on the facts up until now, and I've saved my opinion for the very end here. My opinion is, honestly, I like this AI pretty well. it could still work a little bit faster, and the Fleet Commander AI in particular does make some questionable decisions. However, I think especially the individual destroyer captain AI is pretty versatile. It's entertaining to watch, it has a lot of variability, and it makes generally acceptable decisions. Not always perfect decisions, but hey, that's what the player's for. So, all in all, I like it. I think it's entertaining, and, well, games are supposed to be entertaining. That's kind of the whole point. So that's my opinion. I would love to hear what you all think based on what you've seen here, so let me know in the comments. I look forward to reading those, and I hope, regardless of your opinion on the AI, that you enjoyed this video and maybe learned something in the process. But that's going to be it for me today. Thank you very much for watching. I hope you will tune in next time, and until then, this is Captain Snuggles, signing off.